Welcome to St Martin Fields and welcome to Great Sacred Music. Today we're looking at the arrangements of Moses Hogan. Moses Hogan, until his untimely death at the age of 45 in 2003, was considered the leading arranger in the African American spiritual tradition. He'd actually set 88 arrangements by the time he was 45, and then a brain tumor took him down. He was born in New Orleans and grew up in a choir led by his uncle. He was a multi-talented man who was also an accomplished painter. It's our tradition at Great Sacred Music that we start by singing a hymn together, and we're going to sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which you can find on the inside of your sheets. If you don't have a sheet, you can find one just on the kneeler right at the back of the aisle. Swing Low takes the motif of the prophet Elijah's ascent into heaven by a chariot of fire and assures the listener of the heavenly glory that will follow death when believers will transcend suffering and rest in their final home. It was composed by Wallace Willis, a Choctaw freedman in the old Indian Territory in what's now Choctaw County, Oklahoma, sometime after the Civil War ended in 1865. And the lyrics, as with many of these spirituals, have a kind of code within them. The Jordan, I looked over Jordan, we'll have that line in a few moments. The Jordan representing the Ohio River, the boundary between slavery and freedom in the slave period in America. Alexander Reed, a minister at the Old Spencer Academy, a Choctaw boarding school, heard Willis singing the song and transcribed the words and melody. He sent the music to the Jubilee Singers of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and they popularized this song during a tour of the United States and Europe. The song enjoyed a resurgence during the 1960s civil rights struggle and the folk revival. The most famous performance was that of Joan Baez during the legendary 1969 Woodstock Festival. Unfortunately, no one who was there remembers it for reasons that are widely understood. It had been, to my knowledge, when I was a rugby player in the early 1980s, late 1970s, it had long been a rugby drinking song, but it became associated with Twickenham after the lightning-fast wing Martin Offier, sometimes known as Martin Offire, had a wonderful performance in a sevens competition in the late, I think in the early, let me get this right, in the late 1980s. And so, of course, his name was Off Fire, so he was known as Chariot. And so when he had a great performance, people started to sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. It's become quite controversial in the Black Lives Matter period because people have said, oh, we shouldn't be singing this song at Twickenham, it's got associations with slavery. And so there's been a movement to ban it being sung, which to me is just ridiculous because it's a celebration of freedom from slavery. So I don't know why anyone would want to ban the singing of this song, but we're not banning it today. We're going to sing it. We remain seated, the voices stand and lead us as we sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. The spirituals highlight a paradox in American history because what you might call principal narrative of the American story is that pilgrims left persecution in Europe and they sailed across the Atlantic and they found freedom in a kind of promised land. But of course the African American narrative is the opposite of that. It was of a people who had freedom and then sailed across, or were forced to sail across the Atlantic, and then found oppression. So all of the spirituals have this counter-narrative feeling to them, where they're running against the majority narrative in America. I guess it's slowly ceasing to be the majority narrative, but it's still the dominant one. We're going to hear another spiritual about a chariot. Good news, the chariot's coming, which combines the hope of Christ's second coming with freedom from slavery. And then we're going to hear this little light of mine, which emerged in the 1920s, so a little bit later than we usually associate with the spirituals. It wasn't actually originally a spiritual at all. It became a civil rights anthem in the 1950s and 60s, but it reached its summit moment when it was sung at the conclusion of Harry and Meghan's wedding in 2018. Now, if you don't know who Harry and Meghan are, I'm not going to tell you.
Good news, chariots
Well, the next piece we're going to hear is called We Shall Walk Through the Valley. It's got rather more mysterious origins. It surfaced in the 1880s. Not clear who the author was. It's clearly based on some lines from Psalm 23 about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. What's notable to me about this spiritual is it's a kind of a lament, but also it puts together some of the sort of metaphorical field of the early settlers, the early white settlers, with the experience of black people emerging from slavery and the difficulties of the Reconstruction and Jim Crow era. It's a kind of convergence. So almost everyone in America can sing this with some sense of resonating with their own history, even though it came from a particular social location. And then we're going to hear Like a Mighty Stream, which is also a confluence of two pieces. You may know the hymn Lift Every Voice and Sing, which when I lived in America was known as a kind of unofficial African-American national anthem. But here it's conflated with the words of Amos 5, which, if you're not the kind of Old Testament reader that goes straight to Amos 5, you'll recognize these words because they were vital parts of Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech. So again, two pieces of music that in Moses Hogan's hands converge and become even more powerful. Well, it's time for us all to sing again now, and we're going to sing Go Tell It on the Mountain, another African-American spiritual compiled by John Wesley Work Jr., rather similar to a couple we've looked at before, dating back to around 1865. It's often thought of as a Christmas carol because its original lyrics talk about the nativity of Jesus, and you may be familiar with the line from Isaiah, "How lovely on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news," from which the theme of the spiritual comes. It too became part of the civil rights struggle when adopted by Fannie Lou Hamer, who combined it with the spiritual, perhaps better known, Go Down Moses. But also it became the title of a 1953 semi-autobiographical novel by the later civil rights campaigner James Baldwin, which tells the story of a teenager in 1930s Harlem and his relationship with his family and his church. The novel focuses on the role of the Pentecostal church in the lives of African Americans, both as a negative source of repression and moral hypocrisy and a positive source of inspiration and community, which pretty much sums up James Baldwin's view of Christianity, particularly in the Pentecostal tradition. We remain seated. The voices will stand and lead us as we sing on the inside of the sheets, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Well, we're coming towards the end of Great Sacred Music for this week. Do come along on Sunday afternoon if you're in town at 3:15 for the next Choral Classics, and do join us next Thursday for Great Sacred Music at this time. If you like solemn but beautiful, then we're going to be doing an examination of different versions of Requiem Masses. So solemn and beautiful is the theme for next week, if that's your tune. We're going to make a donation as you leave, if you're in a position to do so. We've made it as possible as we can. We take cash, we take swipe cards, we take texts, we take visits to the website and filling in the details. We take all sorts of things, and there is no escape. So if you'd like to keep this great tradition going, we're coming up to our 9th birthday in 3 weeks' time, so you know what to do. Now, we're going to finish with I Can Tell the World, which is a very appropriate place to finish in terms of reflecting both on Moses Hogan and on the African-American spiritual tradition. It's a great assertion of dignity. What's fascinating about this spiritual is it speaks of blessing as a past event. I have been blessed It blends the historical Jesus with the Spirit's work in saving the singer and helping them overcome oppression on the last day. It's a counterpoint, if you like, to the songs of protest and the songs of promised escape and the songs of final deliverance at the point of death. This is a recognition that actually that in human form the African American people have been given everything they need by God to assert their historic and present dignity. And it's a poignant moment on which to reflect, not just on the legacy of Moses Hogan, but just to imagine that if he'd lived well beyond his 45 years, how many more wonderful songs he would have brought to us. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, that I'm blessed.